Hi, I'm Dell Hungerford, and I am here to do a little walkthrough of the clarinet method that I've just completed. Several people asked if they could get a preview of it, and so I figured the best way to do that is to just show it to you. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and walk you through the book. This is the full book. Now there's part 1, part 2, and part 3. One of them focuses on the high notes, the altissimo register. One of them focuses on the articulation, and the last one focuses on scales, arpeggios, and all that yummy stuff. So what I end up doing here in the first part, that is, I believe this is in the altissimo register and the articulation one. I go through first telling you how I came up with my idea of tongue placement, which is super important, especially in articulation and in playing in the high register. It's all based on the research I did with my dissertation, which means I can see what's going on inside the mouth because we used a laryngoscope to do it. And then I took another 20 years after that to practice using those methods in teaching students how to play in the altissimo register so they didn't play like weenies. Anyway, so this whole section here is about articulating, who tonguing, anchor tonguing. This is mostly for directors, but it's good for students to look at this too. Proper tongue placement, and then for students who are incorrectly articulating, here's some really simple exercises that will help them do that. Again, if you're purchasing the full book, you're going to get the whole thing for $20. The educator versions are $75 for each part, so $75 for part 1, $75 for part 2, $75 for part 3, but that allows you to make as many copies as you need for your program. You don't have to buy individual copies. It's much cheaper to do it this way. So, but I separated it out into parts simply because not everybody has a program where they're going to be able to play the high register yet. And you might want to focus on certain things, which is, again, one reason I separated it out. So let's move on here. See, here's some examples I show in the articulation version, what we used to do when I was in school, and that really helped us a lot. So, and then I showed articulation through various registers. Again, this is in the articulation one. Then some very simple exercises that you can do in a variety of scales. This can actually be done on more than just the clarinet. I've included my versions of doing this, how I helped my students. Plus, I also use this when I was teaching band. Then there's a whole section on altissimo register articulation, which is in both the articulation and the altissimo register exercises or parts. I believe it's 1 and 2. Part 3 is, I think, all the scales. So articulating at quicker speeds, general articulation exercises. So here, this is just thirds, learning to articulate the thirds in the low register of the clarinet. Then we move up to higher registers. It's much easier to articulate in the low registers than it is the high register because your tongue is actually closer to the tip of the reed. So you start where it's easiest and work your way up from there. That is my whole premise behind all these exercises. Again, I do some more, but I believe I change. Oh, I add a rhythm in this particular one. So they're practicing articulating in the low register, and then you will notice I take it an octave higher. And then for those who are willing, oh, I took the altissimo one out of here. It's at the end in the altissimo thing, I believe. Nope. So if you buy the whole book, it's going to be up, all the articulation will be up front. If you're buying just the tonguing part, it'll be in there, altissimo register, it's moved to the end. So they're in various places depending on which version you buy. Again, we're looking at the full version. Changing some rhythm. I talk about practice gym, tongue gym, all of my philosophy of teaching people how to pace themselves. Here's more articulation studies. These are ones that I've used in my studio for as long as I can remember. I tell my students for longer than they've all been alive, and that usually gets a chuckle. So here's another one specifically for the high register. Then this is an exercise taken out of the Langinus book that helps with articulation, and thinking that the tongue is a muscle, you need to give it a break. There's all these rests, as you can see in here, for that purpose. But what I've done is I've reversed the rhythm, because when you do this rhythm, excuse me, I need to go a little bit further. When you do this rhythm, students want to take they want to stop the air in between the notes, and that's not always a good thing to do. You're supposed to practice these exercises without stopping the air in between. I talk about that there. That's why the other exercise is listed first, because it's easier to play than this one. So that continues on. Then I have a section on air and breathing. I believe, I can't remember which part that is in. It's in the full version, plus I believe the either altissimo or articulation. Then I add a whole section about key signatures. This one is in the scale section, which is part 3, I believe. These are the things that I used to do with my beginning band, and I still do this with my students at the college level. I'm amazed at how many people come and don't understand. And I just simple little things. One of my students gave this is the order of the sharps. Father Charles goes down and ends battle. The flats, battle ends, and down goes Charles's father. So they're reversed from one another. And here it shows all the sharps and flat keys. Then I go through my little scale wheel thing. Show this again, and then this is really cool here. These are just ways to help students remember the order of the sharps and flats and to remember the key signatures. Then the thing that I'm finding, a lot of students come to me at the college level knowing note names only in the middle of the instrument. They don't know which fingerings go with what notes in the altissimo or the shallow register, which is the lowest register. So I'm forcing my students to learn to play just by looking at the note name, so that they memorize this note name goes with this fingering. And I'm finding it makes them listen better than just looking at the notes. If you're just looking at the notes, students struggle with remembering how to do it. So what I did is I created a scale wheel. So the key of C major, you would start here and you go all the way around to go up. You go this way to go down the scale, or you can look at it this way. So you're using the full range of the instrument. Now, if you've got kids who are just learning, then you would have them go to a different, they do like the bottom register and whatever. You can cater this to whatever you're doing for your own students. If you are, doing the educator version of this, this is all in there. And I made all of my students, even 5th graders, learn all the enharmonic notes. I mean, that's just part of life. So we see this. Did that get cut off? Oh, it didn't. So practicing scales, the minor keys, I don't go into the minor keys in this book. This is a really exciting part because I include all the fingerings that we're going to use for all the scales. Here's the scales and arpeggios. So here's a full list, full range of the scales with all the alternate fingerings written in. And it goes through all of them. I do chromatically, starting from low E, the bottom of the instrument. I don't do the circle of fifths. This is how I practice the scales, and this is what I prefer to do with most of my students. Then we add the thirds, which again, I've written in all the fingerings. Then let's scroll down a little bit more. We love scales. Then I took the arpeggio sheet, which is also in Langinus, and made some adjustments and then put a rest. This does include the major and minor arpeggios. I usually just play this sheet straight through it. You'll notice I added all the fingerings that should be used for these lovely arpeggiations. And then I have a whole section on long tones, the best ways to practice long tones. And this should just be part of everyone's playing. This can also be used for something other than just clarinet players. If you're a band director, a lot of the things I have in here you can use for every other instrument in the band. Then this is the altissimo register for the clarinet. I give all these yummy fingerings, the basic fingerings, keys to practicing in the upper register. If you don't play out, you have to play forte, fortissimo at first, just to get used to putting enough air through the instrument so the notes will come out. You know, just don't get a Black & Decker drill tone, I always tell my students. Then there's a bunch of stuff on how to practice. Then we go into all this yummy, I like that word tonight, yummy isolation stuff, information on how to play the high register. Now, here it is again. I write it down note name only so the students will connect the note name with the fingering. Then once they've done that, I do it with thirds, scales, then the chromatic, just to help solidify the note name with the fingering. Once they have that, then we start adding the sheet music, what I call the little black dots. So 3 notes, 4 note scales, 5 note scales, 1 octave chromatics. Then, just as a reminder of the enharmonics are super important to learn. Oh, okay, it's just I'm flipping. Then you have thirds in the high register, then returning scales, all kinds of good stuff. Here's a reminder in the enharmonic fingering so you don't have to go back up and look. High note articulation, high note songs. All this cheesiness is about to come in here. So what I've done is I've taken songs like Yankee Doodle, things from the very beginning band book, and put them up 2 octaves so that people are forced to play in the high register. A lot of students can't play in the high register because they're not asked to do it. So this has pages and pages of high note tunes that I've just put up in that particular register. Then some other cool things that I've put in here. You know, you got to have a little bit of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in there. Irish folk tunes, Baby Bumblebee, and then I take some selections from major clarinet literature. Now I've changed keys and done a whole bunch of things, slurred, added some stuff, because this is to get students to learn to play in the high register. Some more notes on practicing in general. Here's some things from the Mozart Clarinet Quintet, obviously up way high, and then directors that hopefully you can make some of your own. Some practice pointers, and I think that ends the entire book. So the main book is 73 pages, and the others are 29 to 31 pages. And depending on which one that you want to buy, let me share my screen one more time so I can show you where they are on the website. So here they are. This is delhungaford.com. All 3 parts. Part 1, if you click on that, it tells you what's here. This is the one for the articulations. Then you go down here. Part 2 is for the altissimo register. And part 3 is, I believe, all the scales, arpeggios and thirds. I call scales fishy things because, you know, fish have scales. You know, it's a really bad joke. Anyway, so again, the educator version allows teachers, private teachers, band directors, whatever program, to copy as many as you need for all of your students. All I ask is that when you're done, when they are done, return the copies back to you as a teacher. Because again, $75 for those is really a good deal, so you don't have to purchase multiple copies for your students. So if you have any questions, there's a place to email me on the website. So hopefully that gives you answers to the preview of my new book. Thank you for listening.